Here we are back in MRAX. This is Neil in Hawaii bringing you live a presentation by Dave Falkenberg and Bernhard Beck. Did I say that right? It is Beck, right?
That is correct.
And Dave is correct, eh?
Yes.
So, Dave, you're with the Silicon Valley Lines Model Railroad Club in San Jose. And Bernhard, you also live in San Jose in the Bay Area, I believe, right? Both of you have been playing with trains and realistic operations for quite some time, it looks like. And Bernhard, you're modeling the 1970s Germany, probably before you were born, right?
Right before I was born, yes.
Well, I might have remembered it, but I think it was the hippie era over here. So I don't remember at all. And Dave, you are a rubber gauger. Well, I can relate to that quite well. And so playing with computers and trains seems to be a good mix to this introduction of remote operations. So I'm going to start off with you guys if you want to introduce your video, and thanks for being here.
Right. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I'm Bernhard Beck, and I've been doing model trains for many years. And today we're going to talk about remote operations, and we'll kick it off right after Dave does his intro.
Yeah, and I'm Dave. I've been model railroading for more than 4 decades, not all in a row. And I've always enjoyed model railroading to the point where when I was really young, I thought that you could actually major in it at college because I saw this whole electrical engineering catalog on my dad's desk. And I thought I can go to college and become a model railroader. So yeah, that's about it. I kind of got in the right line.
I can relate to that. I ended up going to architecture school, which is sort of the same, right?
Yep.
You want to go ahead and share your screen?
All right, let me share my screen. Here we are. I just need to find the presentation.
Oh, tell us about that engine. That's pretty neat.
Oh, that's a Class 64 multi-use engine. That was used for passenger and light freight in roughly 60s Germany and before.
Thank you.
Cool. So, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about remote operations at Silicon Valley Lines today. Silicon Valley Lines is a club in downtown San Jose. We're in California, on the West Coast, South Bay Area, South San Francisco Bay Area. The club has 25 plus members over time. We are in the middle of Silicon Valley, so quite a few of our members have a high-tech affinity, and you can tell that from some of the projects that we're doing. The club has always had a very strong focus on operations since its founding. But we are also at the same time, even though operations tends to be very involved, we are also trying to make it so that it's accessible to newcomers to the hobby and get people into the hobby and grow as part of the club. The club layout, all right, the club was founded in 1979 as a modular club. They had a modular layout set up in just north of downtown San Jose. We're in the current location just south of downtown since 1999. The layout we have occupies a room that is roughly 23 by 72 feet. So it's a good sized layout. It's double deck. We have almost 600 feet of mainline track on the layout. There are, you see the layout plan here on the slide. The lower plan is showing the lower level and the upper plan is showing the upper level. There are 2 major yards. There are 4 major hidden staging areas. There is lots and lots of industry modeled on a layout. And obviously, it's built for operations. We're really trying to model how a railroad would run this for real. So we have trains coming from staging, representing the outside world, coming to the yards, getting passed into, or cars getting passed into transfers or locals that service the industries, and then back out to the world. The club runs monthly operation sessions. Usually it's the last Friday of the month. Sometimes we move that to the following Saturday, or we wiggle it around, especially around holidays. But usually it's the last Friday of the month. We are running 25 trains or so per session. There are typically somewhere around 10 to 15 attendees. There is a good mix of passenger and freight. So especially in our, we have two eras that we're operating in, transitional and modern area, and especially in a transitional area, there's much more passenger traffic. In the modern area, you might see a commuter train and much more freight. Like I said, we're running through trains, we're on yacht transfers, locals, switching assignments. It's all based on switch lists, and that makes it pretty straightforward. Computerized switch list. That makes it pretty straightforward for our operators to find out what the train is supposed to do, where the cars are supposed to go, what they're supposed to pick up. The age of operators at our sessions ranges from 12 all the way to 70 plus. So it's a pretty widespread, and even our youngest members tend to be able to run trains all by themselves, communicate with dispatch, and have fun running the trains. Some of the shorter younger members need step ladders, and they might need some help from an adult reaching in on uncoupling cars, but there's always someone around to do that. So this is all working really great. This we're doing this for years, and we're running sessions like that for years. And there comes COVID-19, and with COVID-19 come the shelter-in-place orders that the County of Santa Clara and the state of California established to try and limit transmission of the virus. So that comes to social distancing, and most affecting for us, it comes with no indoor gatherings. Obviously, if you have an inside layout and you have a group of people meeting inside, that's a problem. So we stopped having our monthly operating sessions and instead moved our weekly meetings. Every Friday we typically meet as a club at the club. Usually we work on the layout. We could no longer do this, so we moved online. Bring up Google Meet, meet online, chat about stuff, show and tells of projects that we're working on. Hey, I built this new flat car. I bevered that locomotive. We did tours of members' home layouts, and overall there was a lot of a big social component to this as well, since it's chatting with the people that you're interacting with on a regular basis. There's a lot of moral support that comes out of that as well. So on one of the evenings, we had this idea that wouldn't it be nice if we could do an operating session? So the way we did that, this is what we call the mini ops. The way we did that is that we set up a webcam. The member at home at the layout runs the locomotive, and the members on the video conference, they see what's happening on the webcam that's shared to the video conference, and they as a group need to agree on what the next move is going to be. It turned out that this was really easy to set up. You have a few cars on the train. You share the sequence of the cars before the session starts by email. and where the cars are supposed to go. And then you all have fun as a group for an hour, switching 5, 6, 7 cars. And there's a lot of chatter and banter that comes along with that. So that was fun. We did that on my modular setup. We did it on Bill's home layout. Both layouts are using car cars and Baybills, so both me and Bill just wrote out a switch list beforehand and shared that in email. So that was fun. And after doing this, we figured, wouldn't it be nice if we did something like that at the club? So 2 members went to the club and set up a mini ops in 2 of the layout switching districts. Exactly the same approach. You have an engineer at the layout. You have the pre-share switch list and a webcam that's basically showing what the layout situation looks like and shares that into the video conference. You can see one webcam here on the photo. It's on top of the step ladder. And the laptop is logged into the video conference. In this specific situation, there was another webcam at the other end of the aisle to share the other side of that industry, since our industries at the club are fairly long, so we couldn't get the coverage with a single webcam. But that works. So we have, again, one engineer, and then we also had an audio-video person to take care of moving the cameras around and making sure that what's happening is actually visible to the group on the video conference. And again, the group on the video conference needs to decide what to do and how to approach it. The idea for doing this was we wanted to test out if the internet connection, we have a fairly low-end DSL connection at the club, would actually be able to sustain a video conference. We also wanted to use this to test the social distance protocol, and we wanted to incorporate remote operators. Result of this was a success. This was great. Everybody said, yeah, we want to do this more. We want to do more of this. We had a lot of fun. Let's just do this with the whole layout. We knew that to get this a little bit more, our internet connection needed an upgrade. We were able to get a couple of megabits more. And then we thought about a bit more about how do we make it fun and immersive for the engineers at home. And we quickly realized that we needed to do, we wanted to do something that maintains the engagement for the people that are at home. So we wanted to offer a way of doing this that is an experience that cannot be had when you're standing in the aisle at the layout. So we decided that a mobile camera on the train needs to be part of the solution for this, since at that point, you're actually running a train. You are the engineer. You have to observe the line side signals. You have to rely on the dispatcher. You cannot just peek around the corner of that peninsula if there's another train that you're going to run into. No, you actually have to pay attention. So CapCam on the locomotive in front of the train, that was a clear requirement. So we set that up. We quickly realized we need a little bit more planning for this. So we did that. We did one more session just with webcams, which worked okay. It showed us again the limits of our internet connection. And then we got into this for real. So the way we're doing this, this is a quick overview, and then we'll go into a lot more details how the various parts are working. So you can see on the upper side here, there are the trains. Trains have a camera on it. The camera video stream gets fed into a centralized component. That's OBS. I'll talk about that later. And that combined stream gets forwarded to Google Meet. Any video conferencing software works for this. We happen to use Google Meet. It can also get live streamed to YouTube. And so that's how we get the view of the engineers out to the people at home. And then the people at home dial into a VPN connection that we have set up. We are using OpenVPN for that. Once they are connected, they can just dial up regularly the layout computer using Y-throttle or engine driver. The network traffic goes over the VPN connection back into to the layout room, goes to JMRI, and then from JMRI goes to TCC. For anyone who's familiar with or has used Y-throttle or engine driver with JMRI before, it's exactly the same way. It works exactly the same way. The only difference is that the auto detection feature doesn't work. You have to plug in the IP address of the JMRI server manually. Otherwise, it looks and feels exactly the same, since it's just a bytes traveling over the internet instead of bytes traveling on your local network. So that's the general overview of how this works. So now we're going to dig into more details, and Dave's going to talk about building camera cars.
Yep. So hopefully Bernhard can get some air. So the first thing that we decided to do to build our camera cars was go completely off the shelf. One of the things that you'd think a Silicon Valley based club might do is go off and design custom hardware. And that's a lot of work and it's a lot of support. So we went off the shelf. We also figured out that a Raspberry Pi Zero, the 0W with headers, fits nicely into an HO scale piece of rolling stock. The computer has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It has a camera interface, and best of all, it's $14. It's not really $14 because you got to buy an SD card and you got to buy a bunch of other stuff to go with it. But the computer board itself is $14. So you add the micro SD card and some cables, and you're ready to go. So next slide. The first thing you add is you add a camera, and the Raspberry Pi Zero has a camera interface on it, and it hooks up with a little tiny flex cable. We found a $20 camera from the Adafruit store. You can find similar things on AliExpress. We knew that these worked, so we bought them. So we're up to adding another $20. One thing to think about is you cannot, these are not USB cameras. These are what are called MIPI cameras. And so you need to make sure you buy the correct camera that is compatible with the single board computer that you're using. In this case, the other important thing is that the Raspberry Pi Zero, because of its size, has a slightly smaller camera connector. So this camera solved a lot of problems because it was one piece and it was reasonably priced, and there's a link to it right there. So we go to the next slide. Okay, so Neil will like this because it's kind of dead rail. The important thing when you have a computer is making sure that it can be powered reliably. We thought about running a Raspberry Pi Zero off the railroad tracks, but it's a whole computer. It's a Linux computer. It takes almost a minute to boot. It doesn't like getting its power removed. So it needs a nice steady power supply. And one way of doing that is to have a battery backup system. So there is a board designed for the Raspberry Pi Zero, which once again, completely off the shelf, which is it plugs into the Raspberry Pi Zero headers. It provides a boost circuit to run the Raspberry Pi off a battery. It provides a battery charger. It provides a power switch. It also has an ability to turn off the computer to keep it from trashing itself when it runs out of battery juice. It runs off of single cell lithium ion batteries, which are pretty industry standard. It's not for the faint of heart. You do need to solder the 40-pin header onto this board. You'll also start noticing that it starts amping up. So this is now $34 So the first thing was $10-ish. The second thing was $20-ish. This is now $30. This is, once again, off the shelf. We just bought these. We didn't design them. We didn't build them. We just assembled them and tested them. So next slide. So when working with lithium-ion batteries, there are a bunch of things to worry about. These things are not designed to be used outside of enclosures, outside of electronics. They're designed to be built in to devices where there's protection circuits and there's protection from piercing them. The way that these things work is with chemistry. So you can go to the next slide. So there's important things when you're playing with these things, and that is lithium-ion batteries require a lot of careful handling. You can't just like plug them into a car battery or a wall. They require a whole smart charging controller. That's one of the things the Raspberry Pi juice box does. The batteries themselves are volatile and very dangerous if they're damaged. They rely on a very reactive chemical reaction to store electrons and give them back. And these polymer batteries that we've bought are very easy to damage. A screwdriver jammed through them can have all sorts of bad things happen. So you need a very good enclosure. You also need to store them properly. Don't, leave them in your car glove box or on your dashboard. You should be under temperature control. So, and we want to stress that playing with lithium-ion batteries should be done at your own risk. There are all sorts of regulations within corporations and even within the government. So there's a bunch of recommended handling for commercial lithium-ion cells on this OSHA website. If you are uncomfortable with any of this, please don't try this at home. But if you're an electronics hobbyist or a drone hobbyist or remote control car hobbyist, or you've already been doing dead rail, this is all the rules apply. This is just be careful out there and don't burn your house down. All right, we can move on to the next slide. That's enough doom and gloom. So when I built a camera car, I decided to go a slightly different route. Like I said, I wanted to build an enclosure for the battery. Initially, I was gonna, talk to my friend with a machine shop and mill something. But I decided I needed to build a prototype. So I went to the hobby shop, which was thankfully open, and bought a bunch of strip styrene and styrene rods and styrene sheets and built a prototype enclosure. This was mostly to figure out if I could build something that looked like an industrial flat car load. You can see here that I've mounted the Pi vertically. I've put the Pi Zero and the juice box together in kind of a sandwich. That's how they fit together. And that other rectangular box behind is enclosing the battery. There are better ways to do this if you're not interested in building an enclosure. There are off-the-shelf USB power banks. There are off-the-shelf Raspberry Pi enclosures. But I wanted to take advantage of using the juice box and having automatic shutdown. So next slide. So after a little while and some Scotch magic tape and a wonderful, I forgot how good they were, Walther's Lifelike Proto 2000 car from the personal hobby shop, I ended up with a very cool camera car. The idea here is that it is completely self-contained. It is neither DC nor DCC. It is entirely running from the battery. It is not connected to anything other than through Wi-Fi. And then we're ready to roll. And we will be here to answer all sorts of questions. So I'll hand it back to Bernhard to talk about the software.
All right, so now we have a hardware. We have a camera hardware, and it's basically a bunch of chips and boards, and they need to do something. So the Raspberry Pi is a Linux computer, runs Linux, like Dave said. And it's all self-contained. So what we wanted to have is to make this as easy to use, as easy to access as you can make it. And once it's set up, it should just be a black box. Plug the battery in, turn it on, it boots, camera signal comes on, yay, off we go. At the end of the session, turn it off, pull the unplug the battery, and we're good. Recharge the thing before the next session, and you can repeat. That's the idea. That's what we're going for. So camera car software. This will get a little bit technical. This might be off-putting for people that are not super familiar with Linux or compiling software. Fear not. I'm putting this in here for completeness, but we are going to have a software download on Silicon Valley Lines shortly, where you can basically download the image that we're building with these instructions. Okay. So what we'll do is we're basically going through a standard setup of a Raspberry Pi. All these setup instructions for Raspberry Pi start with the Raspberry Pi imager. You download the Raspberry Pi imager, put it on your computer. You tell it which SD card to write to. You stick that into your computer. And then the imager writes the operating system to the card. At that point, if you took the card and put it into the Raspberry Pi, it would boot. And it wouldn't know what to do, but it would come up and sit there just by itself. So we need to bring it on the network, on the Wi-Fi network. So that involves telling the camera which network to use. So there is a file, wpa-supplicant.conf. It's on the SD card. If you mount that as SD card and put it on there, you can edit the SSID and the pre-shared key with your network information, and done. So once the Raspberry Pi boots after that, it will come up on your Wi-Fi. So how do we get it to boot? We take the SD card out of the computer, stick it in the Raspberry Pi. It boots, it comes up on the network. You need to find the IP address, and that depends a little bit on your network, how to do that. So I'm not going to talk about this. Standard login is Pi, the password is Raspberry. For many networks, SSHing into Pi at Raspberry Pi.local will work. Then we just do a bit more configuration. We change the password if we want to. We don't have to. Change the host name so we know which camera this is. We turn on the camera and the interfacing options, and we expand the file system so we have the whole space of the SD card to use. Reboot the thing again. And then we build the software that we use to connect the camera to the network. So the way you think about this, we use MJPEG Streamer for this. MJPEG Streamer talks to the camera, pulls the video signal, the pictures that the camera is seeing off the camera, and makes them available on a network interface. On the right here are the instructions to build that. And that's when you're logged into to the Raspberry Pi. The Pi Zero is not particularly powerful, so building this will take a while. It will finish eventually, but it will take a while. Once you've gone through that, you start the MJPEG streamer. On the left here is the command that we're using. So MJPEG streamer -I means input. We're using the Raspberry Pi camera interface, so that's the RaspiCam. We use SD resolution, so 640 pixels horizontally, 480 pixels vertically, with a frame rate of 15 frames per second. And the output is supposed to go over HTTP. And when you take this command and put it on the command line, type it in one line. I had to break this up for the slide, otherwise it wouldn't fit. So this is one long line. Once this starts without an error, you can turn around and in your browser, type in this URL, and you should see the image, the camera image from the camera car on your browser, just like that. So on the picture here on the right, you can see my my first prototype camera car in the rear. As you notice, I'm living dangerously, and I have not put an enclosure on that battery yet. Please put an enclosure on this when you do this. And the camera is on the right next to where the rubber band is, and there's a screwdriver that you can see in the image in the browser window. You also see that the camera in my case is upside down, since that's the way that's because of the way I folded it. So we need to turn this image or flip it over so that it is correctly oriented then. So yeah, so we start this automatically with an edit to an in the RC local script on the Raspberry Pi. Reboot, put the camera on a car, and there you are. That's the view that we were looking for before.
And
now,
when this is all, when we make a pre-built image, all this will have already been done, right, Bernhard?
That is correct.
Other
yes.
than setting the password and changing the name.
The only thing that that needs to go on the pre-built image is the information for the Wi-Fi. Everything else would be on there already. All right, so now we have one camera. We are a club, we have multiple members, so we of course want multiple cameras. And for the fun of it, we also wanted to add ambient cameras that show the room. And once you take all of that, it becomes a little bit cumbersome to remember all the IP addresses, where those video streams are coming from. Remember, the cameras are just independent units that have an IP address that provide a stream of video that anyone can point to if they have network connectivity. So what we're doing is we use a software called OBS Studio that knows how to pull the video stream from any random media source. There are lots and lots of options that OBS supports. In our case, we use the option to pull an HTTP stream from the camera. So we're using an RTSP stream to pull off our stationary cameras, mix it all together into a single video stream, and that's what goes out to the video conference. We can also take the same stream and feed it into YouTube, but we found that our DSL uplink does not, just barely not have enough capacity to support both YouTube and the video conference at the same time in decent quality. So unfortunately, we had to drop the YouTube option for now until we decide that we want to spring more money for a larger uplink pipe. So the way this works then is the engineers that are supposed to run trains, they join the video conference like for our normal club meetings. There is one participant in that video conference that provides the view of what we show everyone. And at that point, they dial up the camera or their train with engine driver. They know what camera to look at. And from there on, they can control the camera. They see out to the front. They can see the turnouts in front of them. They can see the signals, mostly. I'll get to that in a little bit. Depending on how many trains are currently running, we also can patch in the view of an ambient camera that comes along, like on the lower right corner here. This picture here shows the OBS screen. You can see the video windows. That upper part of this window would be shared to the video conference. The lower part is basically for the person driving this or playing the director, if you will. Now, for the other part, remote control. Here's a little bit more detail on this. Our internet router supports OpenVPN. I really like OpenVPN. It's a great software package. It has wide platform support. It's easy to install. It deals with pretty much every network configuration seamlessly. It's pretty straightforward, so we use that. The remote engineers install a package called OpenVPN Connect on their phone, on the laptop, desktop, whatever they want to use to establish the connection. They can even establish multiple VPN connections. And once the VPN connects, their device that they're connecting with behaves as if it's on the network. And like I said earlier, at that point, you just dial up engine driver, connect to JMRI, and off you go. Now, couple notes about camera placement. We built various different prototypes. Here's my prototype. I mounted the Raspberry Pi horizontally on a styrene sled, and just put that on a regular flat car. And as you can see, this fits nicely into the HO loading gauge just fine, not a problem. It's very low profile, and I'm still keeping the camera in place by using the rubber bands there. So sometimes it likes to slip around a little bit. There are other ways to do this as well. There's Dave's version on the top right, and we even took the same package that you see here, the juice box and the Raspberry Pi, connected and mounted it inside a dummy locomotive. The camera is looking out the front nose, and there's a small battery built into this locomotive, but we found that it doesn't last for very long. So I took a slightly different approach here and connected a standard USB enclosure, USB enclosure, put it into a well car, and constantly charge that smaller battery from a bigger battery. A note on camera placement: we found that if you put the camera all the way in the front of the nose, like on that dash 9 here, the camera will be in the overhang of the locomotive. So if you have a tight turn, like in the middle here, the camera will not show you a whole lot of what's just outside the inside of this curve. A better way of doing this is to use a very short car. Just by its nature, if you put a camera at the front of a short car, you can see more of the inside of a curve, or even better, mount the camera further back on the car, like about half to rear third or so, gives really good visibility to what's happening around you. Unfortunately, that has the disadvantage that we are going to probably see part of the car. One more thing that we're doing is during operating sessions, we use FRS radios. So we connected we built a bridge that just connects the speaker output of the radio to the microphone input of a computer, and the speaker output of the computer to a microphone input of the radio. It's a really ugly cable. You can see it here. I just soldered that together by butchering part of this is butchering a Motorola headset, and the other part is just a standard audio plug. The really nice thing here is that when you use a setup like that, the radio goes automatically into Vox mode. Vox mode is the radio will detect when someone on the computer side is speaking. So when someone in the video conference is speaking, the radio will start transmitting. And so everyone who is on radio will hear the people from the video conference. And of course, in the opposite direction, it works the same. I talked about paperwork before. We found that it's best to distribute all the paperwork beforehand. Obviously, the remote engineers still need to know where the train is going to, where it's supposed to stop, and possibly where switching is supposed to happen. We found that doing switching with remote engineers is just as much work and needs just as many people as switching in person at the layout. So we are not running any trains remotely that require active switching at an industry. It's just not, it doesn't make sense, especially for social distancing. Obviously a train, each engineer needs to know which train they're running. They need to know which camera is responsible for their train, and then look at the respective view in the video conference to follow the train along. Couple of practical considerations here. Obviously, signal positions must be visible on camera, even if the signal is located on inside curves, which some of our signals are, and they're just outside the view of the camera. So we have to fix a couple of things around layout. We are using direct traffic control, DTC, for assigning block authority. DTC has a notion of DTC block boundaries, and those blocks need to be clearly visible to engineers as well. We're still fiddling with this and trying to make that better. With the radio crossover, whenever there's chatter on a video conference, it will be transferred to the radio, and it will prevent communication between the engineers and dispatch. So people have to really pay attention to behave on the video conference and only talk when it's actually necessary. This is not what we used to.
Well,
so
it might be what we're used to now with needing to mute on video conferences, right?
Yes,
so it's
exactly.
becoming normal.
Yes. And it's also a difference to our regular club evenings, because in the club evenings we can just chat away, and it's very easy for people that are just watching to say how much they like what they're seeing, and then they're interfering with communication of the engineers of dispatch. The other thing is, you need absolute perfect track work for this to work flawlessly. Almost nobody has perfect track work, so on occasion there are derailments, there are dead spots. It is required to have a brakeman at the layout that is helping those trains that get stranded somewhere or that are losing half of their train. And just someone in the layout room who's paying attention and can help out with the 5-finger crane wherever that is necessary. Speaking of people in the layout room, this is very much, what you can do is very much dependent on your local COVID regulations, obviously. So in our case, we have decided to limit the number of people in the layout room to a maximum of 5, and the AV operator is not even in the layout room. The other part of that is that when you have enough operators or enough engineers in the layout room, we use those guys to run the local trains that are going to industries, and alternate that with more brakemen as necessary when there are more remote trains. And that's all we have. Obviously, this not only applies as an approach to times during COVID, but the exact same technology can be used when when you have remote members of the club or people that are sick and want to participate in op sessions as well.
We didn't cover the dispatching portion of this, in that all of our mainline turnouts are already internet controllable because of just our club. We've been doing that for a couple of years, and so we have had dispatchers dispatching from remote locations for the last 4 years at least.
That's interesting.
That's just panel.
And
that's just Panel Pro. That's also off the shelf. Anybody can do this.
That was a question that just popped up with regard to dispatcher, and so maybe that's a clinic for another day. It did beg a question from me, and I use Discord for communication, not in gaming, but you can assign operators, like if it's just the engineer or the brakeman along with your conductor, you could limit it to that or to the dispatcher, right? And I don't know if you've experimented with that. Like I don't know if Speed has used this as well, but I know that Gordy was.
Yeah, we have not experimented with that yet. It's definitely an option that we do need to look at. The more communication you have between different parties, like dispatcher to engineer, engineer to brakeman, engineer to yardmaster, it does make sense to have separate channels for that, and Discord is a great way to do this.
We use a little app called Zello Push to Talk, and you also have channels.
Yep.
Yep.
There's also a mumble as well.
There were a few questions during the presentation, but thank you so much. You mentioned a 12-year-old member as part of your club. Is that the lower limit of where you'll accept younger members into the club, or are younger people allowed?
So the way it works is we have the concept of a family membership. So any members under 18 are actually members through an adult member of the family. So the adult member joins the club and is responsible for their children. At the layout, they need to be around. We cannot have children by themselves at the layout, obviously. It's just not a good idea, and liability-wise problematic. So the parents or a guardian needs to be present for anyone under 18. But my younger daughter was running trains when she was 10, and she was fine. I mean, she needed a little bit more guidance, but that's what the parent guardian is there for, and they help. So it's actually a win-win. The kids have fun, and they get to see what else you can do with model trains, while we're all covered. And from the parents' perspective, it's great too, since at that point you're spending quality time with your children on something that you hopefully enjoy too.
Thank you. I think that answers that question really well. I was curious if you do recruit younger members or how you go about getting younger members into the group, but it sounds like it's always through an adult or a parent.
We have some members where the children are the driver and the adult comes along.
Interesting.
Yeah.
On a more technical level, someone asked, why are you using a Raspberry Pi instead of an off-the-shelf Wi-Fi camera? And I think you explained that why you want to keep it independent.
Right. So the Raspberry. So hey, we're tinkerers. That's the short of it. The Raspberry Pi gives us more options for control. It allows us to have larger batteries connected. With the batteries that we can connect to this, we can run a whole day, a session for a whole day, and not have a problem. We can add additional features. We can use input-output pins on the Raspberry Pi to control lights or whatever we want to add to this off-the-shelf setup at a later time, which is you cannot do with a regular Wi-Fi camera.
Gotcha. And have you thought about using a? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
These guys are, speaking of different, I wanted to talk about the battery stuff. These are probably far better cells to use. These are the 18650 lithium ion cells. So they're in a metal container, like a standard C cell, D cell battery. There are other options. So like I said, we wanted a little bit of DIY so that we had flexibility. And so here's, there's a 4400 and a 2200 watt hour battery.
So these cameras are running at 3.7 volts.
Yes.
The cameras are running at probably 3 point something volts, but the Raspberry Pi is running at 5 volts. So there is a buck boost circuit in between the battery cell and the computer. I can go on and bore. I can lose more people than Bernhard probably did by talking about analog electronics.
I got it. The next question was, could you use the rail power to recharge the battery like you might use a Neil Stanton kind of setup?
Yeah, I think that would be good. One of the things that, because the computer is kind of a 5-volt system, Neil's stuff for dead rail is kind of optimized for running DCC kind of stuff at like that 13-volt kind of level. But yeah, it would be very easy to take one of Neil's circuits and put in a 5-volt buck converter, either from any of these robotics online places. You just do that; it'd be great.
Actually, I think I have one of his here, and you actually have to bump it up to 12 volts. So you could just output.
Yeah, it's a boost.
3.7.
Yeah. You need 5 volts, and you need about 2.5 amps peak to run all this stuff.
Okay. So that's going to draw the battery down pretty quickly.
Yep.
Have you tried? Let's see. How far are we from PhD remote ops systems? What is PhD remote ops systems? I wonder if that's a typo thing or autocorrect.
Or it could be just could also be a commentary, right? If you think about it, operators, for people who aren't into operations, sometimes you just don't get it, and we go way deep into the weeds, arguing about like semantics of train order correctness and all that, and people who like building buildings and like weathering models could care less. So and you can get a PhD, either a doctorate or a piled higher and deeper. It depends on who you are.
I'd stick with the MS myself. The question was, can you rotate the image with the config settings in the Raspberry Pi?
Yeah.
So I noticed that Bernhard uses it this way and you were using it this way. So obviously there must be some control there.
Yeah, there's like a dash rot 90, turns at 90 degrees or 270 degrees or 180. Yeah, it's all there. There's more there. It's like turtles all the way down. Just keep looking.
I'm sorry, some of the questions are a little off topic. The question maybe using a stay alive kind of power supply. That's another option, right? I don't know if it'll provide enough power.
It's kind of funny. Yeah, I could lose everybody else to talk about that. It has to do with instant loads versus sustained loads, right? A keep alive is really good at giving you a kick of power when power is cutting out, but it doesn't run a computer for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, and keep in mind that whenever you lose the power and the Raspberry Pi shuts down, you need to wait that minute again for that thing to boot. So
it's
rather
way
not
worse
have
than
it break it.
It's way worse than having the sound glitch on your sound decoder.
Yep.
It's like a minute until the end camera comes back.
I know we're running over a little bit, but there was a last question about my couch for a person of size. I'm clearly not taking over the whole thing here, but my layout room and my man cave are one and the same. So I feel it's important to have a really comfortable place to sit and enjoy what you guys are doing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, and there's also a YouTube video that just got posted on the NMRA page, different than the one that this is. So,
All right.
all right.
We could post links if Marty or Gordy would make one of us a moderator. I don't know if Marty, if you're a YouTube moderator, but you could do that by going to the settings. And you're a smartass, Marty, for showing that. But I'll hopefully we'll see where that goes. Thank you again, guys.
I'm waiting outside for you to open up so I can come and have a cup of coffee. I've been here all morning.
You have to press the button for the video.
Oh, okay. That's one of those cameras, isn't it? That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And no one else can see this, so no one knows what the hell we're talking about. But thank you guys for showing up. And this is a great presentation. I look forward to doing something like this in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Brad, do you want to take it from here?